I confessed to the reclusive boy in our class, who wears a hearing aid. I asked straightforwardly, I like you. Would you like to go out with me? The boy, hidden in the shadows, glanced at me and softly replied, dating me means we'll get married. Can you handle that? I nodded with a smile, of course, husband. At the beginning of my freshman year, a boy in my class caught my attention. His name is Eric Harvey. He has a beautiful face, tall legs, and delicate, fair skin. In short, he looked perfect, like a mannequin. He always kept his head down, sitting in the corner of the last row, rarely speaking, and not making friends. Before long, his reputation as a reclusive and aloof person spread. Then one day, our classmate Hogan Dulles accidentally discovered Eric Harvey's secret. He took off his hearing aid. During the break, Hogan Dulles slammed his hand on the desk, and loudly announced this secret to the class. Your aloof idol is deaf. All that talk about being a high mountain flower. He just can't hear. A wave of murmurs rippled through the classroom as everyone turned to look at Eric Harvey, who was dozing with his head down on the desk. Some students, reverting to their primal instincts, shouted, he's deaf. Do you girls still like him? Who would like a deaf guy? No way, no way. Who would want to marry him, and be his mom? I happened to witness this, as I returned from the restroom. I walked from the door to the podium, tapped the desk a couple of times, and looked at Hogan Dulles, asking, hey, I heard you were born in the year of the goat. The classroom fell silent, all eyes on us, eager to witness the unfolding drama. Hogan Dulles, who had been laughing uncontrollably, swallowed hard when he saw me talking to him, and stammered, why yeah, I'm a goat. I casually twirled a piece of chalk in my hand, and smiled knowingly. Hogan Dulles, your name sounds nice. The students collectively gasped, and a red-haired boy in the front row widened his eyes in shock, almost squeaking, Goddess, why do I feel like you're confessing to this fat guy? Don't be ridiculous. There's no way the goddess would like him. Immediately, the classroom erupted into chaos again. Hogan Dulles shot a warning glare at the red-haired boy and looked at me, with a fawning expression, almost drooling. I smiled, took the microphone from him, and continued, but it would be better to change it. What do you think? He nodded eagerly, asking, which one should I change to? Let's use this one. I stepped closer and wrote a word on the blackboard, asterisk asterisk impotent asterisk asterisk. Hogan Dulles read the word aloud, causing an uproar of laughter from everyone. Realizing he had been outsmarted, his face turned red and pale, breathing heavily like an angry donkey. But because I had more supporters, he dared not say anything. What a stupid bully. I ignored him and strolled down from the podium, grabbed my textbook and bag from my original seat, and headed straight to the empty spot next to Eric Harvey in the last row. The noise in the classroom seemed to have nothing to do with him. He remained buried in his arms, quiet and adorable. Yes, adorable. I never thought of him as aloof or reclusive, I only found him cute. I wanted to ruffle his hair, pinch his cheeks, touch his ear tips, and be his girlfriend. To achieve this, I had been secretly observing him for a long time. I had also discovered that he wore a hearing aid. But liking him felt like sudden rain pattering against the window. I couldn't control my heart's moist and turbulent beating. Noticing the sounds I was making, Eric Harvey's long fingers moved slightly, but he didn't look up. I mimicked his position on the desk, cupping my hands to form a microphone to send him my voice. Hello, I'm sitting here. Is that okay with you? He still didn't respond. I heard that when the environment is too noisy, it's hard for even a person with a hearing aid to hear what's being said. I took it as he didn't hear me, and patiently waited for the class bell to ring. After class started, the classroom gradually quieted down, but Eric Harvey still didn't look up. I shuffled my arm a little closer, focusing on the crown of his head, and asked in a moderately loud voice, Eric Harvey, I like you. Would you like to go out with me? The boy hidden in the shadows paused slightly, slowly lifting his head, his dark eyes shimmering. After a moment, he softly asked, dating me means we'll get married. Can you handle that? The crescent-shaped red mark at the corner of his narrow eyes added a touch of allure to his cold face. I met his slightly lifeless gaze and nodded with a smile. Of course, husband. Eric Harvey paused in his movement to sit up. After a long time, he finally responded, Are you serious? I curved my lips, just about to speak when a serious voice interrupted our little moment. Rita Cronin, can you answer this question for us? From the podium, the teacher's sharp gaze glared at me through the glasses, seemingly displeased with my daydreaming in class. I lazily stood up, glanced at the question on the projection, and answered in a second, The teacher's expression softened a bit, and his gaze shifted to the boy next to me, hesitating for a moment before deciding not to call on him. It was as if he knew about his situation. There was pity in his eyes, lacking that equal treatment in calling him up to answer the question. I felt inexplicably annoyed. Sometimes, this self-righteous concern and preferential treatment are nothing more than a higher-up's gaze and silent persecution of those below them. Eric Harvey silently kept his head bowed, twirling a pen between his fingers, his bangs obscuring his expression. I stood up again, and loudly reported, Teacher, Eric Harvey is also daydreaming. You should call on him to answer the question, just like me. The teacher looked at me in surprise, and our gazes met in the air for a moment before he slowly spoke, then for the next question, let Eric Harvey answer. As Eric Harvey stood up to answer, I took his notebook and pen, writing my answer on the paper. Seriously, are we dating? When he sat back down, he nudged his paper back to me with a reply, I'll do what you say. After class, I formally invited him, can I have dinner with my boyfriend? Eric Harvey lowered his head, packing his books, and softly responded, If I overlooked the slight blush on his ear tips, it sounded quite indifferent. During dinner, he was very quiet. Perhaps he was used to being alone, and wasn't accustomed to having someone suddenly accompany him. I was pondering how to bridge the gap between us. Out of the blue, he suddenly spoke, Thank you, I hadn't swallowed the food in my mouth, mumbling in confusion. Thank you for helping me out, but this isn't good for you. I'll clarify with everyone tomorrow. Eric Harvey's face was buried low, tapping the corner of the table absent-mindedly, without any rhythm. I guessed it was the few unusual glances that occasionally swept through the room that made him uncomfortable. I swallowed my food, took a sip of water to clear my throat, and clarified for myself. First, my confession isn't to help you out. Second, dating is good for me. Third, you're not allowed to clarify. We agreed that we're getting married. After a pause, I added a threatening remark, I've kept evidence, so don't think you can back out. Watch out, or I'll sue you. Perhaps my threat had worked. Eric Harvey obediently ate his food, quietly listened to my chattering, and let me walk him home. Eric Harvey didn't live in the school dormitory, but rented a place off campus to live alone. The house was very close, so close that I couldn't help but complain, why don't you rent somewhere farther away? After starting our relationship, I realized that I really could be clingy. I lingered and was reluctant to leave, chatting with him downstairs. Eric Harvey remained calm, answering any questions I had, but wouldn't initiate conversation. He was so tall that I felt a bit tired looking up at him, so I focused on his well-defined hands that seemed to provide a sense of security. I reached out and brushed against his wrist, smiling, Can we hold hands? He didn't move, so I gradually wrapped my fingers around his, intertwining our fingers one by one until we were holding hands. I couldn't tell whose heartbeat was racing, creating a chaotic rhythm in the night. I leaned in a little closer and bent my hand to signal him, Bend down, I have something to tell you. Eric Harvey hesitated and slightly bent down, tilting his head to listen. I leaned closer to his ear, and teased softly, Hey, next time, you should be more proactive, okay? He took a moment to react and slowly grasped my hand back. A love song played from the supermarket entrance nearby, setting the perfect mood. I happily tilted my head, and turned to look at him. But when my gaze fell on the hearing aid near his ear, I inexplicably felt sad. I had researched that the sound transmitted through hearing aids could be somewhat distorted. In other words, Eric Harvey would never hear the most natural and genuine sounds. Perhaps sensing my downcast mood, he tentatively reached out to pat my back, awkwardly trying to comfort me. I blinked, still mesmerized by the romantic night, as if under the spell of a siren. I leaned in to kiss his cool ear tip. The person in front of me stiffened in shock, the flush creeping from his ear tip to his whole ear. I lost control and kissed him again. He seemed to have just realized what happened, releasing me suddenly, and stumbling back several steps, accidentally knocking his hearing aid off. I felt incredibly guilty and asked, Are you okay? Oh no, I was too aggressive. I scared his innocence away. Eric Harvey probably felt embarrassed. He didn't dare look at me, hurriedly bent down to pick up his hearing aid, mumbling, "I'm fine." As soon as the words left his mouth, we both froze. He had just picked up the hearing aid, so how did he hear my question? I stared at him in disbelief. "Eric Harvey, you can hear. And no, it's not that." Eric Harvey's fingers curled tightly around the hearing aid, nervously stammering. It was confirmed, he could really hear me. I was astonished, waiting for him to explain. A car passed by and stopped nearby, with a voice calling out to me, "Rita Cronin." That name sounded a bit familiar. I turned around to see someone I hadn't met in years, still as graceful and gentle as ever. It was my neighbor, Meredith Forster, a truly remarkable person. I had admired him since I was little. Reuniting with an old friend made me feel a bit happy, and I stepped closer to ask, "What are you doing back? Did your mom come back too?" "Does my mom know?" Meredith Forster's mother was a close friend of my mom's. A few years ago, they moved abroad together, and I thought they might never return. "Yeah, they both came back. They're at home." After answering, Meredith Forster gently reminded me, "That guy just entered the neighborhood. He seems to have misunderstood something." Hey. I turned back, confused, only to find that Eric Harvey, who had been standing there just moments ago, was gone. "I have to go now. I'll visit your mom when I come home for the holiday tomorrow." I said this quickly and followed an older man into the community. Earlier, when our class collected personal information in a document everyone could see, there was no privacy at all. I had noticed Eric Harvey's address at the time. It was Building 2, Apartment 520. I made my way there and spotted a boy in black clothes and hair talking to a cat on a patch of grass near Building 2. I tiptoed closer. His voice was low and soft, laced with a whimper, as he complained to the cat. "She's a liar, she forgot me in just half a day. She likes that guy. As soon as she saw him, she forgot all about me. I know no one would like a little deaf guy." "Deaf? Aren't you able to hear?" I approached him, puzzled. The moonlight cast shadows over him and the cat, causing the little cat to puff up in fright and scamper away. Eric Harvey buried his head in his knees, sounding sulky as he mumbled, "Just go away, you don't care anyway." His voice grew softer, dripping with a sense of grievance. I squatted down in front of him, resting my hand on his head, and ruffling his hair to comfort this sensitive soul in front of me, saying, "I do care, look at me, okay?" Slowly, Eric Harvey raised his tear-filled eyes to meet mine, and tears began to spill over like spring tide. I couldn't help but smile. How could he still be such a cribbaby? I smiled and cupped his face with my hands, gently wiping away the tears at the corners of his eyes with my thumbs. "What are you crying for? That guy was the son of my mom's best friend, my brother, and role model. Not what you think." With misty eyes, Eric Harvey looked up at me. "Really?" "Yeah, why would I lie? Do I look like a heartbreaker?" Without hesitation, he replied, "Yes." I was quite indignant. "This is my first relationship. How about you? How many times have you dated?" Eric Harvey pressed his lips together. My heart raced as if I were at the highest point of a pirate ship, filled with both fear and anticipation. Finally, he parted his lips to say what I wanted to hear, "First time." A smile spread across my face as I playfully pinched his ear. His lashes fluttered, seeming both shy and delighted. But I didn't forget the main point. I calmed my smile and asked, "Can you explain now? How come you can hear me?" Eric Harvey paused his breathing for a moment, seeking reassurance with a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "You will always like me and marry me, right?" I thought for a long while before uncertainly answering, "If you don't make any mistakes, I probably will." With my promise, Eric Harvey finally began to explain. "I became deaf after a high fever when I was little, and I still can't hear many things now, like cat meows or insect chirps, except for you." I was taken aback, pointing to myself in confusion. "So, you can only hear me?" He took off his hearing aid and leaned closer to me, his breath warm. "Yeah, only you." Those few simple words poured into my heart like hot glue, making me feel a fiery excitement. I almost gasped. "That's amazing." But the next moment, the chilly evening breeze shook me out of my momentary infatuation. This is the 21st century. I must be crazy to believe it. I stood up in silence, feeling a bit disappointed, as if I had misjudged him. He was just a liar. Eric Harvey looked up, his hurt expression in the moonlight holding a kind of fragmented beauty as he concluded, "You don't believe me?" Then, he forced himself to smile, almost pleading, "I didn't lie. I didn't make mistakes. You'll still like me, right?" I sensed something was off with him. He seemed fragile, sick, and a bit delicate. Such a person could be dangerous. Long-term repression and lack of security could lead to excessive dependence and possessiveness, making him sensitive, suspicious, and obsessive. Lost in my thoughts, I felt a gentle tug on my shirt. Eric Harvey, with red-rimmed eyes, looked at me pleadingly. "Don't leave me. I really didn't lie. You like me, and I really like you. We should be together and never apart." He was just so incredibly adorable. I might also have a problem. Overwhelmed by this irrational feeling, I bent down, hooked his hoodie drawstring, and kissed him. Our breaths mingled, making me feel dizzy. His lips were soft, so easy to kiss, and so enticing. The air felt thin, and reluctantly, I pulled away, forcing my heart back down. If I jumped again, it might just burst out. In the suffocating warmth, Eric Harvey managed to gather his thoughts and prove to me, "I have a disability certificate at home. Just wait for me." He stumbled upstairs, leaving me alone in a whirlwind of emotions. Never mind. Given how he wasn't thinking clearly, I'll forgive him. It was getting late, so I texted him, "I believe you. Don't come down. I have to go back to my dorm." After sending the message, I tucked my phone into my pocket and strolled slowly along the path under the starlight. When I swiped my card to enter the campus, I glanced back unintentionally and locked eyes with someone who seemed to be trying to hide. Eric Harvey's eyes were still red, looking pitiful. I waved him to go back, pulling out my phone to signal that he could call me. The phone rang quickly, and he complained in a whiny tone, "You smiled at the guard just now." I laughed, teasing him. "No, I just made a polite smile." He responded with a gloomy, "Oh," clearly unsatisfied with my answer. I softened my tone to reassure him. "It was just a polite smile. Don't overthink it. Get some sleep. You have an early class tomorrow." After a long silence on the other end, he surprised me with, "Can you move out and live with me?" I nearly thought I misheard him and seriously warned, "We just started dating a day ago." Eric Harvey looked confused and bluntly asked, "Isn't it okay to live together after dating for a day? How many days do we need to wait?" I almost choked on my own saliva, and took a long moment to reply, "At least a few months." He pressed further, "How many months is that?" My face heated up, and I fanned myself as I replied, 3 months, I guess." He mumbled while calculating the time, then announced his conclusion, "Then you can move in with me on New Year's Day, okay?" I hesitated. Okay, I thought that would ease his worries, but to my surprise, he had a new worry. That night, my phone vibrated incessantly, startling me into turning off the vibration for fear of waking my roommate. I pulled down the notification bar to find it flooded with messages from Eric Harvey. "I miss you. Can you say you like me again? Woo woo. I miss you so much. Can I video call you? Can you kiss me tomorrow? I like being kissed by you. Why aren't you responding? I'm sorry. Do you find me annoying? Are you going to abandon me? Can I wait for you downstairs in your dorm tomorrow? Would you mind? I'm sorry. It must be embarrassing to be my girlfriend." I watched the messages pop up one by one, feeling compelled to respond. "Okay, I like you. Yes, we can video chat. And yes, I can kiss you. I'm not ignoring you. I'm not annoyed. And I won't abandon you. You can wait for me. And it's nothing to be embarrassed about." After replying, I turned on the little night lamp inside my curtain, plugged in my earphones, and video called him, typing quietly, "Now you can watch me sleep, but no crying." On the other side of the video, he held back his tears, obediently shutting his mouth, blinking at me. It felt like he could never get enough of me. Before I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder if he had fallen for me at first sight when the school year started. He was just too clingy, more so than I was, and clearly very insecure. Early the next morning, Eric Harvey was waiting for me downstairs with breakfast, catching the attention of several boys and girls around. Not to mention, his looks were seriously striking. I was just about to approach him, when a cute girl with short hair ran up to Eric Harvey, her cheeks flushed, looking rather adorable. She seemed to be encouraging Eric Harvey, telling him not to listen to others' nasty comments, and that he was excellent and wonderful. As she spoke, her voice wavered with emotion. Eric Harvey had never seen anything like this and looked at me in a panic, as if to say he hadn't made her cry. I stepped forward and handed a tissue to the girl, and through our brief conversation, I learned the reason. It turned out that the short-haired girl and her twin sister both had a congenital leg length discrepancy, but it wasn't very noticeable. Sadly, her sister had jumped off a building recently, suffering from the inferiority complex brought on by her flaws and the judgment of others. So, upon seeing the heated discussions about Eric Harvey being deaf and wearing a hearing aid, the short-haired girl felt both angry and worried. I wasn't very good at comforting people, but I could only do my best to tell her, perhaps, in some way, it's your sister guiding you to redeem your past self. She has always been by your side, protecting you in every version of yourself. In that day's psychology elective class, the topic was about mental illness and psychological disorders. Depression and bipolar disorder are both struggles, filled with confusion and the painful conflict between the desire for life and the pull of death. On this day, I held Eric Harvey's hand tightly. I told him not to think too much, and not to get sick. I will do my best to take care of him. My affection is not a fleeting impulse. It is a sincere feeling after careful consideration. In my future plans, there will be a place for him. Eric Harvey, who is in love, cries easily, gets jealous, and asks for kisses and reminders that I like him, every day. He gradually becomes clingy, tirelessly expressing his love. It seems that I am the only harbor for his spirit. Thankfully, my harbor only accepts his ship, always open to him. The tender days sent away the bleakness of late autumn, welcoming the first snow and Christmas. On Christmas Day, I stood on the stage for a singing competition final. Unfortunately, Eric Harvey had another competition project to attend to and probably wouldn't make it, but I didn't know when. Someone braved the wind and snow, smiling at me from the audience, with every breath exuding love. Every time I blinked, the pure white snow on my long lashes fell gently, beautiful like a painting. I had a surprise that I didn't tell him. The song I was about to sing was written for him. Since he could only hear my voice, I decided to learn to sing, to mimic the sounds of nature, birds, and insects, so he could hear more wonderful sounds. That night, the little cribbaby cried uncontrollably. I finally coaxed him back to the hotel. After some cuddling, he started to sulk again. The cause was that a boy in the audience called me wife, and when I heard it, I broke into a cold sweat. Jealousy, though late, had arrived. I tried every means to soothe him. Don't be angry. Just think of him as calling the microphone, wife. Okay. No. He buried his face in my neck, and tears began to well up again, sniffing. I've never called anyone wife. Why should he? I chuckled and ruffled his hair, softly coaxing him. Then you call me that. My promise counts, but others don't. He responded solemnly. No, you can only call that when you're married. I pecked him on the cheek and playfully teased. Okay then, husband tilde. Eric Harvey's ears turned red with embarrassment, but he insisted, you can only call that when you're married. Seeing him blush so deeply, I wasn't planning to let him off easily. I leaned in and kissed him. Since my hands were a bit unruly, he pushed me away, his breath trembling slightly. I patted his clenched fist and laughed. Don't be nervous. I won't bite you. His breath caught for a moment, and after a while, he replied in a hoarse voice, I'm worried I might. Just as the words left his lips, he shifted from passive to active, his warm breath overwhelming me. The little bunny had turned into a big bad wolf. I was kissed until I felt dizzy, not knowing if it was from lack of oxygen or pure exhaustion. Once Christmas passed, New Year's Day arrived quickly. The day I moved into Eric Harvey's house, he couldn't hide his happiness. I was also quite happy, finally relieved from having to sleep while video chatting every day. I was genuinely a bit scared my phone might overheat and explode. Initially, I thought he wanted me to move in for some romantic escapades, but after a while, I realized I had misjudged the situation. After another failed attempt to flirt, I declared that Eric Harvey was a ninja, The next day, I had dinner and karaoke with some girlfriends. Each of them was a lively girl, sharing about their boyfriends and asking me about my progress. I hesitated for a while, then managed to squeeze out a few words. He's a bit conservative. Unexpectedly, just this one sentence led to my being educated by them for a long time. In summary, they suspected Eric Harvey was either gay or impotent. Otherwise, how could he be indifferent to a goddess-level girlfriend? I was left speechless. After goddess, it was more or less accurate, but with everyone chiming in, I started to waver. Gay was impossible, but the latter, I had indeed never seen Eric Harvey lose control. Doubt is one thing, but I still needed to maintain his reputation, so I quickly steered the conversation back, building up his image as a reserved and aloof person. Not even 2 hours later, a certain clingy person started asking when I would be home. My girlfriends were used to it, waving me off and urging me to hurry home and soothe him. I grabbed my bag and made my exit. Just as I left the booth, I ran into Meredith Forster. He was busy. We hadn't seen each other since our last chance encounter. Meredith smiled gently and mentioned that he saw I won the competition, inviting me to sit down for a drink and chat. I knew he owned an entertainment company under his group, and I had received many offers from them recently. The conversation went smoothly, and the benefits were good. I accepted his invitation and decided to sign with his company. Once he was off work, Meredith Forster reverted to the charm of a neighborly big brother, chatting with me about everyday life. As we talked, I lost track of time. I ended up almost an hour late for my meeting with Eric Harvey. When I got home, the lights were off, and Eric Harvey sat in the corner of the sofa with a pillow, eerily quiet. I approached him quietly in the dark, wrapped my arms around his waist, and nuzzled my chin against him, begging for forgiveness. I'm sorry, I was just chatting about work and muted my phone. It wasn't intentional. Punish me. Make me kiss you 100 times. Okay. Eric Harvey remained unresponsive, allowing me to shake him. His mind was drifting far away. He knew his love could be suffocating, but he couldn't help it. Once a person has, they will crave more. He had heard more than once others say that a beautiful flower was wasted on cow dung. He could hide his insecurities and sadness, but he couldn't hide his fears, jealousy, and possessiveness, continuously demanding while fearing rejection. Eric Harvey's silence seemed very unusual to me. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, I planned to kiss him and gradually coax him, but he avoided me. In my confusion, he turned us around, and in an instant, a dangerous atmosphere enveloped us. He held my hand to his lips, the soft touch tracing the pulse of my wrist, making my hand tremble. Even when unhappy, he wouldn't dare make a mistake. His hoarse voice, filled with utmost sincerity, seductively asked me, "Is that okay?" With no rationality left, I nodded, until his warm breath began to creep up my arm, like the sea surging towards me. Our fingers intertwined. His eyes turned red, misty, repeating over and over, "Please, love me, don't hate me." The next afternoon, I woke up and realized clearly that my friend's concerns from last night were unnecessary. An upset Eric Harvey was terrifying. I begged him, and he said he wasn't wearing his hearing aid. I called him a liar, saying he could clearly hear my voice with magic, and he replied that the magic had failed and he couldn't hear anything. Seeing me awake, Eric Harvey finally looked frightened. He helped me put on my socks and jacket, looking very innocent. "Are you hungry?" I made dinner. I huffed, finally turning the tables and punishing him to give me a shoulder massage, and kneel to scrub the washboard. Finding some time, I began to interrogate him. "Why did you do this?" Eric Harvey lowered his head, answering softly, "I went to find you last night and saw Hogan Dulles." I more or less knew the rest without him needing to explain. It was likely that guy was stirring up trouble again. I felt a bit angry and lightly tugged on Eric Harvey's ear. "Didn't I message you saying I was chatting about work with Meredith Forster? You believe him, that kind of person, over me?" Eric Harvey buried his head deeper, probably feeling wronged again. I released my grip and stroked the red tip of his ear. "If anything is bothering you, tell me." "Don't cry." Eric Harvey looked up at me, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. "Hogan Dulles said your parents would never accept someone like me as their son-in-law. You're so outstanding. Meredith Forster is 100 times better than me. You two are childhood sweethearts. And I'm just a deaf person. His voice grew softer, as if about to shatter into dust. I sighed. I knew he would definitely overthink if I didn't take him home to meet my parents. I gently stroked his back, promising, I don't like anyone else. Don't believe those nonsense. I'll take you home for New Year's, and my parents will like you. I didn't tell him that I was already gradually preparing my parents for this. I wouldn't let him be wronged. Eric Harvey quietly hummed, snuggling closer to me. Don't leave me. I only have you. I joked. I won't leave you. If I die, I'll become a ghost and follow you. Are you scared? You won't die. I'll protect you. Eric Harvey held me tightly around the waist, as if afraid I would really disappear. I gently flicked his forehead. Silly. Everyone has to die. Eric Harvey was a firm materialist, but at this moment, he wavered, looking up and asking me, if we turn into ghosts, we still have to be together. Okay. 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 He was so cute that I couldn't help but pinch his face and smile. On New Year's Eve, I took Eric Harvey to meet my parents. They treated him very well, without any unusual behavior. I mentioned wanting to see the orphanage where Eric Harvey lived as a child. I soon discovered that the orphanage was right next to the house I lived in as a child. We just moved later. I told Eric Harvey we should go see the headmistress. I even joked that we were childhood sweethearts. I asked Eric Harvey if he had seen me because there was a gate at the back of the orphanage with a small path I walked many times. I walked it to school and back home. Eric Harvey said he couldn't remember, but maybe he had. The headmistress was very nice, chatty, and could name every child and their likes. She loved each child. When we left, it was pouring rain. I pretended to forget something, and asked Eric Harvey to wait for me at the door while I turned back alone to splash through the rain. From the headmistress, I learned about Eric Harvey's childhood story with a beautiful little girl. Eric Harvey's family was lost during an earthquake, leaving only him, a baby in a cradle, behind. As a child, he was adorable and smart until a high fever caused him to lose his hearing. He gradually became quiet, sitting on a small stone every day, watching the people pass by on the other side of the fence, trying to hear what they were laughing about and chatting about. At that time, I was the only color in his desolate world. He could hear my voice. To him, I was the most unique view beyond the fence. When the principal first heard little Eric Harvey mention this, she didn't believe him and took him to see a psychiatrist. Later, it seemed to be true. Eric Harvey relied on me, watching me transition from kindergarten to elementary school, then from elementary school to middle school. All his words and perceptions of the world came from me. In the second year of middle school, I moved away. For the first time after growing up, Eric Harvey cried in a dark corner, shedding many little pearls of tears, because he couldn't see me. The principal comforted him, saying that as long as he studied hard, he could see me again. So, the principal helped him inquire about my news while he focused on his studies. That little girl was me. Eric Harvey managed to push through obstacles to reach me. The principal asked him if he had talked to me yet, and he said no because he was too afraid. In his heart, he never felt worthy of me, but I got close to him and confessed my feelings. In that moment, he thought a lot. He wanted to hold on to me. Eric Harvey felt that waiting by the stone for me every day as a child was silly. So he asked the principal to keep it a secret. Fortunately, I was persistent and managed to get her to tell me. I knew this boy had some secret crush that I didn't know about. Just then, a text message arrived. You've been gone for so long. When are you coming out? The sender retracted the message right after sending it. Maybe he thought he was being too clingy and worried I would be annoyed. I said goodbye to the principal and ran to the poor little guy waiting for me with tears. Time flew by, and I celebrated my 20th birthday, then my 21st birthday, and I released my first album, then my second. Eventually, I held my first concert. To keep the little cribbaby from crying, I asked my fans not to call me wife because my boyfriend would get jealous. Eric Harvey grew up year by year, thriving and shining in his own field. His defensive shell seemed to only come off when facing me. He would put away all his sharp edges and show a vulnerable side. To the outside world, he was a stern and meticulous elite. To me, he was just a little cribbaby with no sense of security. On my 20th birthday, He kept asking if I would wait for him to get married, because the legal marriage age for boys is not earlier than 22, while for girls, it's 20. Eric Harvey, being the same age as me, had to wait 2 more years to marry me? He lacked confidence and constantly worried that I would lose interest and abandon him. That silly boy. His handsome face would never get old, so there was no way to get tired of it. An anxious Eric Harvey kept coming up with new tricks to keep things fresh. One day he would play a role, and the next day another. His creativity made me smile endlessly. Year after year, Eric Harvey finally turned 22. The silly boy woke up early and took me to the Civil Affairs Bureau, staring at the tightly closed door while waiting in line. He even felt frustrated for getting up too late because there was a couple ahead of us who had come earlier. That couple noticed Eric Harvey's impatience and let us go first. This made Eric Harvey extremely happy. After receiving the certificate, I stuffed the red book into his hands, saying, "Silly boy, keep this safe." "Okay." Eric Harvey took the little red book, feeling as if he was dreaming. Even when we got home, he was still in a daze, so adorably clueless. I felt moved, lifting his hand and placing it around my neck, teasing, "Baby, wake up, let's test your knowledge." "What bone is this?" Eric Harvey snapped back to reality, his fingers sliding down, tracing my spine and explaining the scientific names of the bones. He stopped explaining when he reached the tailbone. Eric Harvey's gaze darkened, and he swallowed hard, softly asking, "Wife, should I continue?" He was so enticing, kissing my fingertips lightly, his eyes pleading. The golden sun rose higher outside, while the red tide within the room surged uneasily. Eric Harvey covered my eyes, repeatedly expressing his love, saying, "I love you so much." Another year passed, and it was the university class reunion. I had inquired about those who had once spoken harshly to Eric Harvey. They were all doing quite mediocre. Eric Harvey was smart, and in just a few short years, he became a hotshot, something those losers could never reach. At that class reunion, I took Eric Harvey along, not for any particular reason, just to watch the drama unfold. Unfortunately, none of those cowards dared to show up. Eric Harvey's gaze was glued to me the entire time, reluctant to look away for even a moment. At the table, drinks were being passed around, with a group of half-acquainted people exchanging either genuine or fake compliments, making everyone feel drowsy. I found it quite dull and pulled Eric Harvey away early. The evening breeze was gentle as I walked home, holding Eric Harvey's hand. Suddenly, a drunken man stumbled out, clutching a bottle, mumbling incoherently. I thought he looked familiar and glanced at him a bit longer. It turned out to be Hogan Dulles. He was dead drunk and stumbled into the pedestrian crossing when the light was red. In the blind spot of a large truck, Hogan Dulles lost a leg. Eric Harvey told me this. At that time, he had pulled me into his arms and covered my ears. Even so, the feedback of the bloody scene reached my eardrums through the screams of bystanders. Later, the next news I heard about Hogan Dulles was about his funeral. He couldn't cope with the unusual looks and derogatory remarks from others about his disability, so he ended his life on a sunny afternoon. I still remember, many years ago, on a similarly bright afternoon, he was one of those others and even worse. A sighing scene, a fleeting dream. I lay on the balcony rocking chair, basking in the spring sunshine. As I reflected, I got up and walked to the kitchen door, watching someone in an apron smile brightly. With a hint of melancholy, I asked, "Eric Harvey, what should we do?" "Busy cooking." Eric Harvey looked up with a guilty and pained expression. "I'm sorry. Are you hungry? I'll come home earlier next time to cook for you." I shook my head. "That's not it." Eric Harvey paused, a bit anxious. "Then what is it?" I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around his waist, mimicking his tone to tease him. "I love you so much. If I don't have you, I'll die. Please don't leave me, okay? Can you keep liking me forever?" With each line I said, Eric Harvey's face turned redder. He was so shy that he tried to stop me. "Don't copy how I speak." I dodged his hand as he tried to cover my mouth, continuing to imitate his usual teasing style. "Woo, do you not love me anymore? Why won't you answer me? My husband rejected me last night. Is there someone else?" "It's okay. Just remember to come home. I'll do my best. Can you come home early tonight? I'm so sad at home. Under my playful teasing, Eric Harvey turned completely red, tightening his grip on my waist and lifting me onto the bed. He took off his hearing aid. I raised my hands in surrender, saying, "Okay, okay, I won't tease you anymore. I know I was wrong." He didn't reply and pretended not to hear. I crawled to the foot of the bed, negotiating with him. "I'm hungry. Can we eat first?" He still didn't speak, hooking my waist and pulling me back. Warm kisses raining down. I leaned into his strength and whispered in his ear, "Eric Harvey, I love you. Did you hear me?" His warm breath broke the silence. He quietly responded, "I heard you. You said you love me. I do too." At the same time, his hands tightened around my waist, his tall figure blocking the faint light coming through the curtain. In the shadow, time flowed on. I could no longer distinguish day from night. Amidst the shifting shadows, only our intertwined fingers gave me a steady sense of security. In a daze, I heard Eric Harvey's murmurs, "In my world, all I hear is your voice, and I love it so much." The end.